Well, welcome back, Falconers. This was today's project. I managed to get the seat out. It's held in by 4 bolts, studs actually, to go through the floor. None of them broke off. Just finessed them with some PB blaster and some back and forth on the nuts, and they came right off, which was great. Cleaned and vacuumed all of the mouse nests from inside the seats. And this is what's left of the carpet, the underlayment, and the sound deadener pads, which are basically just falling apart. They looked intact until you touched them. Well, here we are with the inside of the car. And here's evidence of why I bought this car. These floors are, I mean, there's some brown scale in there, but they're beautiful. With maybe one exception. This side's the worst. I suspect the cowl might leak. All of these cars, the Mustangs and the Falcons and Fairlanes and all these cars, suffer from cowl rust around the fresh air vents. And I really can't tell. What happens is the water runs in here, and the plenum in here from the factory usually doesn't have any paint or anything on it because it doesn't get in there, and they rust out. And then the water cascades down into here and sits. And this floor, the sound proofing, the mouse fur I call it, was wet. I mean, you can still see the floor pan's still got some dampness in it. I'm letting it dry out before I hit it with the wire brush. But driver's side really wasn't bad, and everything came out pretty nicely. There is a rust hole on this side, and this is where the seat mount brace under the floor is welded. It's pretty much gone, and I mean, you can see it's going to take some work, but this is all welding that can be done in a place that really nobody's ever going to see it. So if your welds aren't as spectacular, that spectacular like mine are not spectacular, it won't matter. And this one's just starting. We'll probably end up cutting that out and welding a piece in there too, but the rest of it's just phenomenal, and this is why I spent the money on the car that I did. The seam sealer that Ford used, when it gets old and dry, it just falls off, and that was all seam sealer that just came off when I hit it with the vacuum. So there's a lot of spots where it's missing seam sealer now. This whole area right here. Kind of interesting, there's some part numbers or something stamped in. You can see them back here. They're just kind of fun. These seat belts are all junk. I'm going to take those out next. Next, I'm going to take out the rear deck, which is a homemade piece of ugliness. Get rid of all these Mickey Mouse speaker wires and so forth. But I'm really pleased with what I found in here. I kind of figured this is what I was going to find. That's a little worse than maybe I'd hoped, but I'm not surprised by it in the least. So, very happy with this. Very happy with this. Another curious note is after you take the carpet and everything out, you'll find this, which really has the look of something that somebody made, except for the way the holes are made. But apparently it belongs there, near as I can tell. These holes are kind of elongated so they can be moved to fit. And the 2 holes look like they belong there. The other curious thing is there's this deep well here under the accelerator pedal. I guess, don't know what the intent was if your heel's supposed to go there, but it's too far in, I think. But there's a factory drain hole there because it's the lowest part in the floor pan. But I don't believe there's one here. I may consider adding one there. Alright, so one of the things I know about Fords in general, and old Fords especially, is that the heater cores are garbage. They usually don't last very long. And Ford tends to make them a real joy to put in, at least on the modern cars. And I was thinking when I was working in the engine bay that a guy should probably go ahead and order a heater core, because while we're in here we should do it when it's convenient, because eventually it's going to go bad. Well, guess what? This thing's been dripping since I was in here. I don't know how much of that was from before. It might have been why this floor was damp. It may not be from the cowl, as I first suspected. So we ordered a heater core, and going to start taking this whole deal apart, which will probably be a lot of fun, but at least it's accessible on these old cars. I wouldn't want to do this on the Lightning or anything newer. So that's on order. Also ordered some other parts. One other thing I decided to check was the front brakes as well, because the one drive up and down the road I took, the car was pulling to the one side. I thought, well, maybe they're just not adjusted correctly, but lo and behold, one of the wheel cylinders is bad. I think it's actually the one on the other side, but at any rate, I ordered 4 new wheel cylinders and new brake hose for the back and some other things. Whoever did this work on this car, and these brake shoes, by the way, are virtually brand new, but that wheel cylinder is junk. It doesn't look like there's any dampness there, but when you pull the outer cups back, it's wet, and so that means it's time for new ones. So I hate to spend money on drum brakes that I don't intend on keeping, but these wheel cylinders from Rock Auto are like $10 a piece, if that. And even if they only last a year or two, that's perfectly fine, because that's all I hope to have these brakes on here for. Again, I just want to keep this car drivable for the next year, maybe, while we're sourcing all the V8 components and building up that, so that I can keep driving it with the Tower of Power here. So the parts on Rock Auto are just incredibly cheap. Now, they don't always have everything. Their inventory for this car is a little limited, and then you got to play the which warehouse is it coming from game to try to avoid paying ridiculous amounts of shipping. And so my current order is coming from 3 different warehouses, which drives me crazy, but it was the only way I could do it. And even with the 3 times shipping, the parts were still cheaper than buying them from any other source. So, okay, heater core, well, heater assembly is out. And you have to take this whole assembly out to remove the heater core, because it comes out apparently here on the firewall side. This all had insulation between it and the firewall, and that was damp. So yeah, the factory insulation is not the greatest. I'm not sure what the replacement stuff is. I'll probably wind up buying it, because I don't think it's terribly expensive, but I'm a little concerned about the fact that it traps moisture between the firewall and the heater box. As you can see, this thing looks kind of rough. You can definitely see the moisture accumulation there on the electric motor. The squirrel cage is metal on these, and it's pretty rusty. And the whole thing just generally needs a redo and cleaning up. And I would encourage anybody who's working on a car that's been sitting to take this out, because you're probably going to be guaranteed to have a mice nest in it someplace. So I'm going to take that heater core out and see what's in there, but it's probably going to be unpleasant. And let me show you the inside of the car with this out. I did want to mention the shop manual does not make very good mention of how to get this thing out. I think there's only like maybe 4 or 5 bolts that hold it on, but they're from the engine bay side, and it's not at all apparent in the shop manual if that's the way you're supposed to do it. But if you look under here, you'll see that there's no way to get to nuts or anything where this attaches. And so that's the firewall. You can see it's got some moisture induced problems there. And then here is the underside of the cowl. that's pretty scaly too. So I'm going to clean all that off, see what's really under there. And then this is the fresh air vent, and the cowls always rust around here, and you can see this one's pretty crusty. It's on its way. You know, I'll probably try putting some seam sealer on that or something after I clean it up, but there's no way to get at that to fix it from the top side unless you cut the car apart. So they're one of the big problems with Mustangs and Falcons and Fairlanes. You can buy a new one of these plenums from Auto Metal Direct. It's marked as for a Fairlane because AMD has not yet figured out that the Falcon's the same, despite me talking to them at Carlisle this past year. Their catalog still does not reflect that, so I don't know if they're ever going to figure it out or not, but Fairlane is identical. From the firewall forward to car is the same, so no problem there. Took the kick panel, took the kick panel off, and there's some foam insulation here, and then there was some, well, it's foam backed, but there was also some what looked like fiberglass insulation on the underside of the glove box. If we look through the glove box opening, you'll have to take the glove box part out. You can see up here some fiberglass that was adhered to the underside, and that seemed to be factory. So I'm not worried about duplicating that. So that's where we are. I am still torn about the whole headliner thing. It would be a prime time to replace it. It does have a couple of tears, and it's dirty, and so on. But to replace it, you gotta take the back window out, for sure, and the windshield should be out. I'm not sure you have to have that one out to glue it at the front, but it would make it better if you did. The headliner itself is not expensive. It's under 200 bucks. They're not fun to put in, but I can probably do it myself, as long as I'm willing to accept the fact that it'll probably have a couple wrinkles in it when I'm done. But I think I'm going to hold off. It's only 4 bolts to take the front seat out, and the back just pops out. So we can get back to this point pretty quickly when it is time to do the headliner. So that's it for this update. Try to get this up so you have something to see, and I'll be back again soon.